Good morning and welcome to AI in Australia. This is episode 2, and I'm joined with my colleague Sean Rolls in the very cold studio today. Hi, Sean. How are you?
Morning, Tim. Yes, it's definitely a cold mornings both on the east side of Australia. So winter is well and truly come to us. So time to warm up. I think with the fire in the background, I see over you. You've got the nice fire crackling away. Quite jealous.
I've got my great virtual fire in the background, and we went snow hunting this weekend, so that was really exciting. So I think
Fantastic.
on everybody's lips this week is going to be Gartner next week. So you can look forward to. We're going to unpack that today. We've broken down the Gartner conference that's happening in Sydney next week into the kind of core themes, which we're going to unpack. But before we do, there was an article written yesterday by Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, which was entitled "The Gentle Singularity." Sean, I don't know if you had a chance to read this article, but it really did strike me as maybe a bit of a masterstroke in marketing more than anything else. But for our listeners, the singularity is a concept that for many has been associated with quite a lot of fear. I think it was first penned by Nick Bostrom. I think it was Nick Bostrom. And he spoke about this idea, the singularity being the moment at which the outcome or the produce of these artificial intelligences becomes unrecognizable to us as humans. This concept of a machine being able to self-improve and do so at an exponential rate, so that it basically becomes a new type of intelligence that we just can't get to or can't understand. And obviously there's quite a lot of risk, quite a lot of fear associated with that. But Sam's article begins with, "We are past the event horizon. The takeoff has started. Humanity is close to building digital super intelligence." I find that quite provocative. I don't know. What do you think, Sean? Do you think the singularity is really near?
Again, we all have our opinions. Personally, no. I think with you and I both working very closely to it. It's like when I've been joking about the carnival of like going to into a carnival atmosphere that you got all these rides going on. Those organizations that are truly embracing or actually implementing, the Gen AIs, AI models in the organization, regardless of what they say underneath, at least from our experience, they're not even close to it yet. It's still understanding, guardrails, safety, governance, like even to take a Gen AI into an organization and then basically train their own LLMs. They don't have the people. They don't, you're not going to open up a Gen AI off the web into an organization. So there's so many things that back to foundations, and we talk about foundations at Gartner that just haven't even been surfaced yet. That what Altman is talking about, you're right, it's provocative. It's obviously marketing, but looking at the key themes in there, it's like the horizon, in my view, is still a long way far away when people are still trying to get their head around what these things mean and how do they, do you and I focusing on how do we generate business value from these things into my organization, my business model.
I
what's your
completely
take on
agree.
it? Like, what's your view on it, Tim? Like, as I said, with you being hands-on a lot of these areas ahead of me, like, how's your take as well as clients that are moving towards that horizon?
I think that you've described it really well. I think that Sam Altman is probably fundamentally conflicted. He sits on some of the biggest fundraising marketing campaigns the world's ever seen, and it's really in his interest to say that the next big thing that's coming is going to be the singularity. Personally, I hope he's wrong. I hope that Sam Altman is not the person who ushers in the singularity, as he calls it. He talks about the gentle singularity. Nick Bostrom never spoke about a gentle singularity. He said that there were probably, he spoke about a couple of different paths, but the emergence of the singleton is the one that he spoke about the most in his book, which I think was called Super Intelligence, and a really, really good read for anybody who would like to kind of brush up on this. We'll put in the show notes. But I think what strikes me most about Sam's article, and then if we connect that to sort of what we've seen on the ground in the Gartner conference next week, is absolute lack of focus on AI safety and guardrails. He paints an almost utopian picture of, this idea that the singularity isn't going to be, and the reason he calls it the gentle singularities is trying to put daylight between what they're doing at OpenAI and the really big risks. And the really big risks were that one day somebody builds a recursively self-improving system, and that thing gets away from humanity and it has access to the real world on the internet, and we've already passed kind of that. And all of the downside risks, which are underspoken about from an OpenAI perspective, get out of hand. So this positioning of the gentle singularity is, if anything, to my read of it at least, Sam not doing enough, and kind of it adds credibility to all of his safety, the members of the safety committees and councils inside OpenAI, all of them who left in protest against Sam. Unfortunately, to me, this is probably another data point that shows that those risks are very, very present. But what you were saying is right, Sean. I think that the reality on the ground is different. Businesses are struggling with some fundamental things. They're struggling with talent. They're struggling with centralized data strategies. They're struggling with just corporate inertia, the fact that it takes a long time to change the trajectory of big ships. So that's where the political ground kind of rubber hits the road. I will just say, maybe just to end off what Sam spoke about, he said, and I think that, again, these are probably really big calls. He said that 2025 has seen the arrival of agents that will do real cognitive work in the world. So we'll come back to that. Then he says 2026 will likely see the arrival of systems that can solve novel insights. That's a year away. That's not even a year away. That's 6 months away. And 2027 may see the arrival that can do tasks in the real world. So, I mean, let's just take stock of reality here. 2025 has been heralded as the age of agents, but to what extent have agents really landed, and are they doing real work in the clients that we see? I mean, I don't know that yes, we've seen some agents, we've seen the likes of Manus and a few others, but are agents really taking over domains yet, or is it kind of still on the horizon?
Well, at least I said, being on the ground and advising some of the largest organizations here in Australia, none of them have got any agents into production, and not even in design. So that's where it's almost like fueling the fire in terms of, like as Sam was saying, that the year of the agents, when the fact that even some of these big organizations don't even know how to implement an agent, let alone build one. So
what an agent is.
Yeah. So exactly. So they will talk about it across the coffee machine. Yeah, we're moving towards agentic AI, and we're going to move towards agents, and this is our agent architecture. But back to the fundamentals of the architecture, the people to actually inform the agent and to transition towards it. You can't just turn off the legacy and move to the agent sort of twin. None of these pieces are even in place. And we all know that big organizations, this takes time. So, and there's no silver bullet. So I don't see this in reality from the clients that I'm advising. And these are, and if they're some of the leaders in Australia, you can only think of those who are behind the curve about where they are in terms of the whole agent, and also to what's on their radar.
I think that's right. And this really does remind me, and Gartner really do get some things very right. But I love their hype cycle, and I love the trough of disillusionment. And I think that the reality is that we are heading towards what do they call it? The peak of inflated expectations. And the peak of inflated expectations comes from this kind of hyperbole. And look, make no mistake, I do think that this is the biggest replatforming we're ever going to see. And I think that agents are coming, and I think that AGI is coming. But I think that we need to be careful of, even if you build the nuclear bomb, you may not detonate that bomb for a number of reasons for even decades. And the reasons are that you need to have the controlled environments to do so. And that groundwork needs to be done by businesses. You don't just buy an agent off the shelf and unleash it onto your business and suddenly it solves all business problems. It's just not how it works. So the tech may be there, but the implementations are still going to take a while.
No, exactly, and it comes back to with both you and I being in the analytics space for years and years, it comes back to just the basic of when you build a model. When we used to build analytics models, even well over 15 years ago, for banks, for complex derivatives, the amount of scrutiny that those models had to do, like model explainability, then the governance of the model before you even gets close to implementation. So it's going to be the same thing for these agents, and because there's a lot more complexity to understand how the agent work, how was it built, how is it going to be managed and governed. This is no different to a model in analytics. And the fact that these guardrails and governance aren't in place, there's no way any organization is going to, as you said, just get one off the shelf, plug it in, going, build me this. Yes, they can play around with it and do demos, and this is what's happening now with pilots and demos, and people are, wow, this is amazing. But to actually put it into production and to have core functionalities or capabilities of an organization run by an agent, I think we're still a long way away from that, given that a lot of the guardrails haven't been in place.
And
what's your take on that? You wrote a really excellent post on agents, which we'll put in the show notes. But referencing that, like, how do you see going from ideation to production?
Yeah, thank you. I think I wrote an article about AI agents 8 months ago when I was building my first agent orchestrations, and I was doing that in a combination of using Python, but using the library called LangChain and Crew AI, trying to solve some more sophisticated problems where I had an agent as a coordinator, then invoking other agents. So you have an agent that makes decisions about a task that needs to control, and then needs to invoke other agents that have got specific context, specific RAG, and specific tools. And what struck me at the time was just that there didn't seem to even be a consistent definition of what an agent was. It was a bit like crypto. Everybody was just saying crypto. If you were selling lemonade, you had crypto lemonade.
Exactly.
Your lemonade was made on the blockchain. It's become very in vogue, and I think it's become incredibly overused. Yes, I think that the reality is that there's going to be, for all the reasons we've discussed, there's going to be, I suppose, a process of organizational adoption. I suppose my fear is that businesses are going to either under or overreact, and that might sound strange. At one level, you can sit as an organization and think, well, everything's changing so rapidly, I'm just going to do nothing. I'm almost going to get paralyzed. The other option is that you're going to just jump right in and try and implement something agentic, but not have done the fundamentals properly and cause big issues. And really the sweet spot, I mean, we've spoken about this before, is in the middle, where you do the hard work and build the foundations really well so that you can get the maximum benefit out of kind of this kind of coming wave. And I think it is still coming a wave. I just wanted to mention two other things, is that the biggest users of all, two of the biggest users that I can think of in the current market in Australia of the promise of AI, and there are many. One is government, and the other is going to be big financial services institutions. And when you were talking about building explainable, predictive models in the past, everybody can remember times when models have been built that have gone wrong. And those models in the past were typically very, very deterministic models. They were kind of put out as devices where you could explain them, you understood what came in the one side and went out the other side. This entire landscape we're dealing with now is probabilistic, and probabilistic models have got a certain amount of variability in the way that they produce outcomes, which means that there are edge cases that are going to go wrong more often than you would have in deterministic models. Now, if your banks and insurers and your government, which are some of the most heavily regulated parts of the economy, are going to be the primary beneficiaries, you can't underestimate the importance of adapting to regulatory change and compliance and explainability of AI and proper governance in unlocking real value. So that is in itself going to be a handbrake of sorts, and I think a good handbrake. I think it is important that we come to technology properly before we implement it. I forgot your question, so I don't know if I answered it at all. I just rambled.
No, absolutely. Like, particularly, it said, and this is where, for us, to no BS in terms of since you've actually built an agent, and that's why I wanted to get your view of have you got your hands dirty when the majority of clients all they do is talk to agents on PowerPoint, talking about it like, we're going to do agent AI, and they've told their leaders that in 6 months' time we're going to be moving to agentic AI, but they have never got their hands dirty. Reality check here, and you've given that really well. And again, I think just to touch on the regulation part of things here in Australia too, like APRA is extremely tough on the banks, as we know. We've had with the reviews in the past, which are pretty. The banks are under massive scrutiny. So, and having read a lot of the reports when I've been advising a lot of these banks in the recent years, they're under massive scrutiny, and having AI is not going to go away. So they're not going to be like, have you done this? Oh, we're using agentic AI, but like, okay, where show us the governance framework? How's it been tested? So, and the fact that, from my knowledge, that hasn't, there's been no APRA review on the AI frameworks or governance yet that I know. When these reviews go place, there's a lot of recommendations that banks need to then follow up on and chase. We're talking 6-12 months before they then go back to APRA and say, oh, we fixed them, and then they go back with more requests. So that cycle before they're satisfied that yes, you can plug that into production and for customers to start using it, it's very conservative here in Australia. So watch this space in terms of aspiration versus reality. I think is still pretty wide.
I want to show you an example for listeners, which I think is a little bit funny. I built an agent. I don't know how long ago this was, 6 months ago. And this agent, one of the tools I gave the agent access to was the Google Maps API. And I asked this thing to give me directions. And in the system prompt, I asked it to specify to the user the details of how. So it would go to the Google Maps API. It would pass it in JSON, get the parameters, get the information back. Google Maps API returns a lot of information, and then the system prompt was that it should return it to the user without too much detail, but enough for the user. So I said, please give me directions from Hoedspruit to Johannesburg, and the agent wrote back and said, the total distance from Hoedspruit to Joburg is 454 km, is right, with an estimated duration of 5 hours and 25 minutes. But this part is a good example, humorous example of how it goes wrong. It said the route involves various steps, including turning left, turning right, continuing on different roads, and merging onto highways. So this is the probabilistic nature, and quite interestingly here, what was going on is as the context window got bigger, the laziness of the model almost increased, and you find some interesting things as you put more and more information into the context window of of an LLM. And a lot of work has been done there, but you start to get these almost lazy results. So imagine this is an explainable. You think you build an explainable AI, and this is kind of the explanation you get. Lots and lots of interesting stuff that can happen under the hood.
No, exactly, and I've done a lot of presentations just in the last year to the C-levels of like one of the key themes I call out is that AI can't manage context, and you've just highlight it. So, and there's so much about like our human brain, where how we we infer a lot of things, and the context that we take for granted, and is to write a prompt, and you could write a very prescriptive prompt. But there's still a lot of context where, as you just showed, but imagine that that it's going to give you a machine readable answer, and then be like, "Oh, what about this?" So if it's purely autonomous, when things go wrong, like imagine if you hear about the testing of the Uber, the robotic cars in I think it's Austin. So basically, where is it right? Somebody was telling me the other week that. Elon Musk is testing, the autonomous delivery of food, using autonomous cars.
Yeah.
But imagine if something went wrong, and something delivered, let's say, really bizarre alcohol to a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
It's like oh, I delivered I delivered per the prompts. This is the address. The person showed me all their checks, and then and these children something gets really, God forbid, wrong to them. Who's at fault? Is it the you can't blame the robot. It's back to who delegated the responsibility of delivering their goods to wrong people, and that's we rate just for context. Like we've been working on autonomous ontologies on the EDM Council, even 6 years back, and there's so much to go regarding like the insurance and who's at fault and liability, let alone the accuracy of things actually happening on the in production as in the real world. So there's a lot of work to do, and these blog posts and the ideation of the Muskets and the Sams, and I think a lot of it is for their own egos and provocative, rather than is this fact that we can digest and then go, oh, okay, we're pretty close to it.
And I think it is important that we continue to lead investment into these spaces, because they will change the world, but we can't underestimate the risks. And I think just as you're talking about all of this, and you think about when you build in a model or an automated workflow in the past, let's take LLMs out of it, because they really are the core change to what we're talking about now. It's quite easy to work out whether or not an input produces an output or fails. So you've got like a very hyper parameterized model, call it that,
Mm.
and you put some information into it, and it either works out and produces an output, or it like produces an error because it doesn't work. Like that's
Yeah.
typically at a very high level how these things would work. So they constrain the way that they get fed, and then they go through a series of steps, and then they give you an output.
Yeah.
The black box is quite explainable. The
Mm.
major difference, and it's so important that everybody who listens to this and is involved in AI understands this difference, is that with these probabilistic models, even if there is no correct input and there is no correct output,
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
fundamentally different. There's just based on an input string, there is kind of a probability distribution of what comes out the other side, and that doesn't link back to anything that is subjectively right. I mean, there are tricks
Mm.
that you can do to make it right, but you can think about a myriad ways. Even if you just think about applying test cases to agentic systems that use LLMs, the space of test cases is so much larger than it would have been the case in old school, let's call them old school deterministic models, because of the fact that they don't ever fail in the same way. They always will produce something, kind of this realm of
Yeah.
almost hallucinating. They're just going to struggle to find something that almost sounds the most plausible as the outcome. So it's a very different world, and
Yeah.
understanding how to build guardrails in this world is something that's going to become
Mm.
incredibly important. And I maintain, we made this prediction in the last podcast, I maintain maybe we should put some side pod odds on this, that in the next few months, we're going to read of some very high profile fails. And what's going to happen is people are going to underestimate the importance of guardrails. They're
Yeah.
going to put agents into production, and we're going to see some really big things go wrong.
Yeah.
That's one of my big predictions for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just to jump on there too, like, and the part of the reason why I 100% agree with you there is like the common mantra that I hear across all industries is that with AI in general, and that them not even thinking the different layers under AI, is that if we don't jump onto this AI train now, we're gonna left behind. So everybody's in a rush to like, oh, we must be using some type of AI, and then we'll push down to the teams. Is AI doing this? Are we working with our AI strategy without actually understanding, well, what is actually AI to our organization, and do we have the foundations and the governance and the guardrails in place to actually let it go? And we all know, like, when you rush into things and cut corners, things
Go wrong.
happen. So that's what's going to happen.
Okay, well, let's jump into Gartner for next week. So I think the core themes looks like a very exciting lineup, and hopefully we'll bump into some of our listeners at the conference next week in Sydney. But really, sort of grouped into 6 major buckets, so we can sort of just step through those. But the first is really just looking at AI and Gen AI. So I think that's obviously the case. So focusing on integrations. Integrating AI into business processes. We've spoken a lot about this, emphasizing responsible use, scalability, and this development of an AI-ready data infrastructure. So this is something that's squarely in your wheelhouse. I mean, what is AI-ready data infrastructure? AI-ready data. How many core principles are there?
Yeah, it's not a buzzword, like it's and this is where hence, like, Gartner sort of like we're all over this last year when I was at Gartner in London and Sydney. And it really is, hence, a lot of it is like there's a core set of capabilities that need to be established to move towards AI ready. So hence, AI and data need to come together. So really basic, it's crap in, crap out. So getting your data to be working towards agents and machines, that's the data side of things in terms of AI, and then the AI layer being the prompts, the RAG. So think of it as like an algorithm or basically a machine. And this is where hence that there is not one definition of what AI ready data is, because every organization will have their different recipe of what the data mix or the data management and data architecture and then their AI mix. But to really emphasize that there are, just oversimplify it, 2 parts of the AI ready model: the AI technology and then the data and the data architecture, the data management, data governance that need to be, keyword, integrated and scaled to generate the business value.
Yep, 100%. And then obviously within the AI data itself, there are a couple of dimensions from an AI data readiness perspective. Many different businesses have got their own approaches, but typically they're looking at things like kind of the availability of the data, making sure it's real time, the completeness, make sure that hasn't got missing fields. How do you interpolate and deal with missing data?
Yeah.
Consistency and uniformity, accuracy, relevance, and then I think contextual semantic layers. That's one of the things that's becoming more and more important, and that's really the domain of knowledge graphs and how you associate meaning across entities, across possibly different data sources in your organization, so that when you're trying to perform a function, it's not just the old school structured query language relationships, but there's kind of semantic layers on top of that that help you bridge everything together.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and this way, like, and it's a big, and I think for us to emphasize here that this is a big jump for every organization that is coming from, well, before AI, I referred to traditional data management to modern data management. Modern data management was, cloud and graph and like distributed data. But now we go from modern to now AI. So you got different maturity paths, and that's where, depending on where you are as an organization on that maturity path, like purely data warehousing, relational databases, which we call traditional old school data management or data, to now moving and then when you move data to the cloud and distribute data and share it across domains with semantic layers and graph. That's the foundations to get you ready for AI. And then when you start putting layers of RAGs and agents, then you need to have that layer further on top. So those maturity paths, that will give context to, as an organization, what AI really means to them in terms of their roadmap and what's the definition of done, which you never done. The path is continually changing. So this way, I think for people who are going to be at Gartner next week and if they're reading it, don't look for the single answer of like, I need to learn. I must learn what AI really actually is. You're not going to get a single answer.
Yeah, that's right.
Come back to the pieces of the puzzle and then bring that back to your organization to make it, importantly, business value, increase your maturity, and and back to solving the business problems that are important to your organization. Are really key things to start with.
So if we think about what this actually means practically in a business domain, so I want to cast our mind ahead 2 years. Let's assume Sam's wrong and we're not overrun by robots in 2 years' time, and we just kind of continuing along with this ingestion of this new technology. In 2 years' time, the businesses who've really invested in building these underlying data layers, so we'll talk about governance as well, but let's just assume you get your AI data ready, So you've got the infrastructure layer properly done, and then you've kind of got your data architecture done properly as well. Businesses, both businesses, the businesses who have done that and the businesses who have not really done that, will both be faced with the opportunity to implement intelligent agentic systems. However, what those intelligent agentic systems can actually do in terms of delivering business value to customers will be worlds apart. So I want to paint a picture, like a chatbot, for example, in the business that's done it well, will become a full end-to-end intelligent agent that can peruse all interactions of me as a customer. It knows when I applied for my home loan, every interaction I've had, it can reference all of it, and it can do stuff in the world for me, help me open bank accounts or provide me real-time risk scoring across all domains. That would be the model where the people have got it right. And then the other one, it's going to like give me half an answer in a particular domain, depending on which service line or which product house I get to within an organization. And then as soon as I ask it a question about something else, which will become my expectation because other businesses are doing it, it's going to say, sorry, I can't help you with that, because it's sitting inside a little data lake of its own, or an isolated data repository sitting inside a product silo. So you're going to end up with like a world where the businesses that haven't got the data architecture right are going to probably start to create incredibly inconsistent customer experiences, because some of the federated parts of their businesses will be able to deliver agentic services, or let's call it like LLM driven type of customer engagements, and others can't. And that's going to be very, very confusing to customers, because one thing we know about customers' expectations, they get set, your expectation of what a business should do gets set by the best in the game. So when I engage with a bank that's done it well, that becomes my minimum expectation across all banks. So then when I have very bitty experiences somewhere else, I'm just going to hold you to account for not being able to do that. So this bifurcates dramatically in a few years' time. And unfortunately, getting the data right isn't the sexy stuff. It isn't. Everybody wants to show the clever wins with the cool front ends. But ignore this at your peril, listeners. Ignore this at your peril.
Well, it's spot on. Like, it's the funny thing is, like, the same patterns repeat. Like, we go back to when apps, were getting built by organizations. So that rather than having to call up to a call center and wait for half an hour, as soon as banks started to bring in apps, then people like, the app that works really well to some bank, that becomes a norm. So when they go to other banks, they go, oh, this app is shit, and then a lot of people, like, I remember talking to our digital head about this in Europe, is that people are leaving a bank because our app is so bad. That's because of, and that's where it's going to be. And to your point, chatbots, when people can go, hey, I can just log on to my chatbot and ask all the questions and do all the things without having to log on to my app and be lost around the customer journey. Then they go to the competitor, also other competitors, say, oh, this chatbot doesn't work. I'm going to dump this wherever bank or customer service they're using because the chatbot doesn't work. And that's when, hence, the early adopters are going to be the ones who are going to take customers away and then get that success. And those who don't get this AI ready layers right are going to find, why am I losing so many customers?
Yep,
and that's
100%
right. Like, that's where there's going to be a rush in terms of, if you don't do the foundations right here in terms of the architectures and the front end and getting the right people to update it and to test it, you're going to find you're going to be losing a lot of customers because of people like seamless, as well as people want the shiny new things that just work, rather than, hey, loyalty, as we know with digital banking years back, is no longer there anymore. They all switch to technology where it works. We all have iPhones, we all have internet. People, that's people want to do things when they want it, how they want it. It's that 360 view of the customer is basically getting closer with AI. So really good point.
Expectations are going to change. Gartner touch on three other, really, I'd almost group them, or two of them together, but I think next Friday for our listeners, we'll unpack this in a bit more detail, or the pod will be released on Monday. But just three other themes we absolutely can't ignore, and I see that they've been touched on. The one is talent, skills, and literacy. I read an article yesterday that said Meta are paying some of their AI engineers $2 million a year, and they're still resigning to go to some of the other frontier labs. So this is a super competitive space.
What did I go wrong? How come I didn't?
I think we should
be a Meta employee. Like, I should have. I think I've been sold the wrong dream to go to university and work for banks. I should have been, become a greenfield and sign up to Meta as a graduate program.
Crazy stuff. But this talent pool is going to get more and more significant. And really, what I read into that is that there aren't that many people in the space who really understand this domain. No. A lot of people are trying to repurpose themselves and pretending to be AI experts, but they're still going to emerge. They're still coming. So talent, skills, and literacy, this is so important. How do you attract talent? How do you develop it? How do you retain it? I think masterclasses as well, just so important right now that you're getting everybody in your organization to a common level of understanding. Then leadership and influence, I see it on the Gartner radar, and so nice to see it. This is CEO-led initiative. This is a strategic imperative. You do need to have right up in the C-suite a clear direction on how you can embrace AI as an organization, how you're going to operationalize it, how you can empower teams, and how you're going to create the space.
That one too. That one, I think, is super important. I think more so than ever before, because to the points where you just talked about with agents, and then we talked about getting the right architecture, and like and then talent. You got spent where every company has limited resources. There's a race for speed. And then you got the stress of people who go, a lot of people are afraid of AI and the speed that it's moving. So to lead an organization of what is the right for them, the right roadmap to execute, how to, keep people from going to the Metas in the world, and then to have budget to train the people up so that they are moving the workforce from, old school to the AI ready school. And also too, then to keep the organization abreast of the changes that are happening. Leadership cannot be any more important than it is today to balance these balls in a constantly changing environment. Like, how do you?
It's very difficult.
How do you see a leader in the space try to navigate some of these multiple challenges?
I think it's an excellent point for us to end today and tee up a conversation next week where we discuss exactly that point. Because I think how you make decisions that are potentially have so much impact while balancing scarce resources, some sort of matrix of decision making is going to be critical for not only CEOs but also managers in different domains. And it really comes down to kind of the final point, which is articulated in the Gartner conference here, which is how do you articulate and assess business value? Because that's the trade-off: present value versus future value. And there's some clever approaches, and let's unpack those next week. What do you say, Sean? Let's talk about how to make this.
Like I say, it's just looking at these and listening to these topics. It's going to be an exciting next week, and it's the great thing is talking to different people out there who's going to be attending. Everybody has a view, seeing where people are actually at versus those who think that they're in the horizon, like the Sams. A lot to unpack. A lot to digest, and looking forward to unpacking this all with you and hearing your feedback next week. Super.
Wonderful. Really looking forward to it. And hopefully we see some of you in Sydney.
Exactly. Give us a hi and a coffee, or say hello. Looking forward to it. See you in Sydney next week.
Yep. Thanks, Sean. See you there. Bye.